Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NRG Championship Series. We are in Madison. I'm Corbin Hostler, joined by Devin Doomwake O'Donnell, or I should say, rather, I am joining you here in the booth. Of course, we had Will Hall in the morning, half of this tournament, and I'm going to come in with Devin and wrap it up. Devin, you've been Ironmaning it all day long, so we want to thank all of you for sticking with us, and I am happy to be here with you. And you've got to watch 5 rounds of Team Trio play already.
Oh yeah, yeah. We've seen a lot of awesome players and a lot of awesome matches on camera today. I was talking to Will a little bit earlier, and we got to see that match from yesterday in action. I don't think we're going to be able to top the Lightning Bolt bottom 13 cards, find a one ring, but we can certainly try. And yeah, it's been an absolute blast so far, and I'm having a great time.
Well, yeah, I guess we have 3 chances a round to do it here, right? Because we're playing, of course, today team trios. We had 84 teams out. Do the math. That's well over 200 players competing today across your favorite formats: standard, modern, and legacy, which I think we're going to try to get to in the next round and show you some of that gameplay. But team trios, team events, they're really just the best, right, Devin?
Yeah, nothing beats team events. You get to play with some of your best friends and a lot of camaraderie, and it really doesn't there's nothing that beats it. You get to play against a bunch of great players and have a great time doing so.
Yeah, and of course, we talk about the team events in the context here of the NRG Championship Series. But that's the great part of these events. This is Sunday. We have our Team Trios event. Yesterday, we casted a modern Showdown $10,000 tournament that not only awarded the top 8 members and down beyond that monetary prizes, but also points towards the end of the year NRG Championship that everyone is trying to qualify for. And then that leads us into today, where we have players competing across multiple formats. So I teased the legacy a little bit. I think that's what we're talking about getting to down in this round, and including some Modern Horizons cards that have really made a difference in the format recently, like the namesake of the next deck. I think that we'll be able to get to. Doom, you want to talk a little bit about just what we're going to get a chance to see that are maybe new to the format.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Psychic Frog is, if we can get that one up on your screen for those of you who may not be
Hmm.
familiar with this card, just really has kind of taken the entire format by storm. And the thing about Psychic Frog is it's not just good in, it is a 2 drop, which it can be a little aggressive, but it just plays so many different roles. It has the ability to get aggressive when you need to. You can dump your hand and put some counters on it, which we've seen, players do yesterday. I remember that one game we watched Christian Valencia against Garrick, and Christian was just kind of played flawlessly and was able to recognize when he needed to go a little bit more in on the frog. But it also is a good discard enabler for stuff like Atraxa, Gristlebrand, and sets up reanimation spells. So it kind of does everything. And on top of all of that, it pitches to Force of Will. So what more can you ask?
That's a great point. And if you think about the context of Legacy, I remember people playing when I got into Magic maybe 15 years ago. Putrid Imp is a little 2 drop 1/1 that you could discard. And now we've got Psychic Frog, which does a heck of a lot more. But yeah, going back to, I didn't play during the Psychotog era. You see Putrid Imp there. Yeah, people always, we just play these discard outlets, and Psychic Frog gives you that plus so much more. And I didn't play during the Psychotog era, which is what Psychic Frog is a callback to. But watching that game yesterday with Christian Valenti, where you named it, we watched him in a game where you're like, oh, that's a blue back deck. It's a card advantage deck. They're going to go long. And instead, we watch Christian just toss away card after card just to 2-for-1 himself, all just to keep the Psychic Frog in play and keep attacking with Psychic Frog and keep connecting with Psychic Frog. And the game played out in a completely unexpected way, for someone who isn't familiar necessarily with that style of gameplay. And that was modern. In Legacy, we're talking about a format where people have always played cards like Entomb and Reanimate and things like this. And not only does it do all the things we just talked about in Modern, the Frog, it also, as you mentioned, becomes just the best discard outlet possible for those types of decks. And also, in some ways, going back to its Modern comparison, it's we were talking off screen. It's kind of like a turbocharged Delver of Secrets in a way. You
Yeah,
protect the
absolutely.
Delver, and you can get there, right?
Yeah, and one funny thing you mentioned the card Delver of Secrets, which, over the course of its entire history, Legacy's been a format since what, 2004, 2005, and really as soon as the card was printed, from day 1, people have just put Delver of Secrets into their Legacy deck and pairing it, back in the day it was with Nimble Mongoose and Tarmogoyf, and
Yeah.
the threats have kind of evolved since then. But we've actually gotten to the point where the threats have evolved so much that Delver has just become obsolete. Like, you see Netherglyph in this deck and no Delver of Secrets. So that's also kind of wild to me.
Yeah. And I think we might be ready here. Round 6 coming to you in our G Championship Series in Madison, Wisconsin. Corbin Hostler, Devin Doomwick O'Donnell on the call. You've got Christian Valenti on Demir Frog on your left. We've talked it up. Now you're going to get a chance to watch it in action. And we got Lian Chen on your right with Death and Taxes, as classic of a legacy archetype as you can find.
Yeah, and as far as you mentioned new cards in the blue black decks. As far as
Mhm.
new cards, let me tell you, Corbin, new cards in Death and Taxes deck. This, Death and Taxes is an archetype I feel like has had a ton of change over the years. I mean, obviously, a lot of archetypes have, but there's a lot of cards in this deck that I've never seen before. So first and foremost, to get to some MH3 cards like Emperor of Bones, which, not a white card, but Emperor of Bones is kind of cool because there's a bunch of things in this deck that kind of go to the graveyard. I think notably Solitude is the card.
Right.
So there's kind of this cool thing where you can Solitude your opponent's creature, put the Solitude into the graveyard, and then get it under the Emperor of Bones to get it back. But yeah, there's so many different cards. There's a Phantom Blade, a pre-war formal wear. I'm assuming those Stoneforge targets, but yeah, there's a lot going on in this deck.
Yeah, it certainly has a lot of one ofs. Like just looking at the list here, I see six, seven, well, six one ofs in the deck and a Yorion. But it's certainly a very interesting list. Death and Taxes has evolved over the years. I remember when I got into Magic, Death and Taxes was kind of like the deck you built when you wanted to get into Legacy and you didn't have just all the duels in the world to play with. You could build Death and Taxes, and it was pretty reasonable. And here we see it many years later, looking still, hey, pretty similar, right? Very different with some of the new cards, but hey, we've still got Mother of Runes. We're still playing Stoneforge Mystic. It's this Ether Vial. We're still on the same game plan, and you see it right there. Scrublands Ether Vial for Chen to start things off, and the Nethergoyf you called out for Valenti.
Yeah, and I had to I was trying to hover over the card in Melee because it wasn't showing up an image, so I had to open up in a new tab. But if we could get these two equipments on screen, the first one
Yeah.
I want to put on screen here is called Phantom Blade. So I believe this is a card from Assassin's Creed. It is a 5 mana equipment, 4 and a black. When it enters, attach it to up to one target creature you control, destroy up to one other target creature. So this is cool because you can tutor it off of Stoneforge Mystic. You can put it into play for 2 mana and then have sort of an uncounterable removal spell, destroy any of the creature. And then the other one here is from Fallout. It's called Pre-War Formalware. So this one is 2 and a white. It's an equipment. When it enters, return a creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield and attach pre-war formalware to it. And then it gives the creature +2/+2 and vigilance. So another, more ways to just kind of expand that Stoneforge Mystic tutor package, right? You have a removal spell, a way to get a card back from the graveyard. So Stoneforge Mystic, it used to just be get a Batterskull, here's a 4/4, but now it's so much more than that, and there's a lot of depth to what you can do with the Stoneforge Mystic.
You're right, especially because the former wear, right? If you play your Stoneforge and they want to kill your Stoneforge to make you take longer to deploy your Battle Skull traditionally, you can play former wear and punish them for it. There's a lot going on there. It's we'll see how much we actually get to see here because Chin has 3 Ether Vials along with a
It's a lot.
Scrubland and a Wasteland, and that's too many. That's too many, friends. You want 1 Ether Vial in your hand. Occasionally, you could handle 2. You never want 3 ever, especially when your opponent goes perfect 1 drop, perfect 2 drop, Nethergoyf, Psychic Frog. A lot of Modern Horizons 3 cards, but this is a 401 team is Valenti's. team up with Ryan Bellamy and Lucas Parsons this weekend. And this is a really nice start for Valenti. And maybe Chin can, obviously you get a lot of tempo off those vials in 2 turns or so over the course of the next 2 turns. But if you don't have enough cards to really put into it, you're not going to get very far. So he probably kept a 2 vial hand and drew a 3rd vial or something, which is not where you want to be. But if you get in powerful enough cards put into it, it does play around cards like Daze or Force of Will or things like that you see off the ponder that Valenti's shuffling away.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, if you are in Lion's seat, you really want to try to find a recruiter of the guard. So,
Hmm.
Aether Vial, not normally very good when you draw 3 copies of it, but there is kind of this chain that you can do where you get the first vial to 3, you file that in, recruiter of the guard, maybe you even go find a second recruiter, then you can have
Yeah.
another vial on 3, vial that one in, go get something else. So, even though there are 3 copies of vial, which normally you, like you said, you don't really want to draw, there is still something that Lion can do with those. And we see looks like a Spirit of the Labyrinth, a Swords to Plowshares, and an Emperor of Bones in hand. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out about Emperor of Bones is you kind of have this other line where if the most popular deck is Reanimate, like
Right.
they're not only are they trying to put Atraxa and Archon into the graveyard, but they're also putting Grief into the graveyard. So if they grief you on turn 1, maybe there's some situation where you can set up where you say Emperor of Bones, target your grief, and then get that into play as well. So Emperor's got some cool utility here.
Yeah. And with the ability to play around any counterspell for at least a creature for the rest of the game, I mean, maybe not a stifle effect. We know that Valenti has access to a couple of those. We see one in the graveyard. These creatures are at least going to come into play for Chen, and they are powerful. And Spirit of the Labyrinth, I don't know if we can get that one pulled up on the screen. That is one of those cards that can occasionally really blow you out in Legacy, and hey, sometimes not. But against, there you go.
Oh
Each player
God, the
can't draw
white
more than
border.
one
Come
card
on.
each turn. Against against the Frog, it's not terrible. And there is a Swords of Plowshares as well in Chen's hand. So a reasonable chance here between those 2 cards of stopping at least some of the value from the Frog here before things get too out of control.
Yeah, it looks like the sequence there was Frog came in, and then with the Frog trigger on the stack, we're vialing in the Labyrinth. And I think Christian has a copy of Fatal Push that he might want to fire off to prevent, just wants the extra cards. So Christian is going to go ahead and do that. And then, yeah, see, it's funny because Lion had the opportunity to Swords to
Right.
Plowshares the Psychic Frog before combat damage. But because we chose to wait until damage and then vial in the Spirit of the Labyrinth, that is kind of awkward because now, even if assuming that's the timing here, if the Swords to Plowshares resolves, I'm pretty sure Christian did announce that the trigger of the Frog was already on the stack.
We'll see how this plays out. I guess this is Christian maybe deciding in this circumstance. We don't know what exactly what's in his hand. Oh, I spot a Force of Will. So we're deciding if we want to fight over the Frog here. And the answer is no in this case. Decides to let it go. That means the swords is gone. Then the push resolves. That means the Spirit of the Labyrinth is gone. And at the end of all of that, you're left with a grown Nethergoyf uh, still crashing in. And here we go. The spell bomb is going to remove a couple cards from Chen's graveyard just so Valenti can cycle it. We'll look at some math on the Nethergoyf. Deal looks like damage might be being dealt now.
I think it's 3. I think I spot artifact, instant land. Oh, it's 4 sorcery at the ponder. So ponder, fatal push, land, spell bomb. So that would be 4 cards. So yeah, it looked like the timing of the sequence of all of that was, I believe, the Spirit of the Labyrinth was before blocks. So before blocks, Violent Spirit, maybe threatening to set up a block onto the Psychic Frog. Christian cast the Fatal Push. Lion cast the Swords to Plowshares. That all happened. Christian didn't draw an extra card, and that's how that all played out. So yeah, now we have a 4 power Nethergoyf here, and the only card left here for Lion is that Emperor of Bones, which may have been good prior to the Nihil Spellbomb. Like you could go Violin the Emperor, adapt, put a counter on it, get a creature
Mhm.
off of that. But now with that Nihil Spellbomb, that's going to make things a lot more awkward. Although we do find a Lorraine of the third path.
Yeah, takes the vials up. Does Chin here? Lorne into the graveyard. So I think we're we're sitting on now 2 cards in hand. You mentioned one of them being the Shadow of Bones. We're taking a quick look through Valenti's graveyard, verify that there are in fact no creatures we're going to be able to get with that Emperor quite yet. That said, we're still going to bring it down. That looked like a Arid Mesa in hand. So definitely back up against the wall here for Chen, almost out of cards, sitting on these files. I mean, a full grip over here for Valenti, 4 or 5 cards, including at least one Force of Will. So things looking pretty good right now for the best Frog player we've seen this weekend. That's for sure.
Yeah, and see what's unfortunate about the Death and Taxes deck is the removal exiles, right? Swords to
Yeah.
Plowshares, Solitude. So if you're trying to if you don't have any good targets in your own graveyard for the Emperor, and the onus is on you to remove your opponent's creatures and have it set up that way, it's not really that easy because again, Swords and Solitude both exile. Now that being said, it is pretty good with Solitude, as I mentioned earlier, where you can evoke the Solitude, put that into the graveyard, and then get it back with the Emperor Bones. But yeah, with no Solitude here, I guess what Chen can do is Chen can crack the fetch. For a no, there's only one Surveil Land. Never mind. So if there was a second Surveil Land, you could maybe try to go fetching and try to find another. Like you could surveil the creature into the graveyard and then get it
Hmm.
with the Emperor Bones. But looks like Chen is just content with picking up the Yorion and Violon 3. So we're getting a little bit closer to that.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's where we're at, right? Is that could be the game plan? Maybe not the game plan you want, but it is a game plan. Um, I think we said 4 on the Nethergoyf, right? The after the Wasteland takes out more lands, that doesn't grow it though. So 10 life for Chen. You still have a couple turns to play with here to maybe advance towards that Yorion. Maybe find something you can blink with Yorion. There are, as you mentioned, a couple of chains that could really get going. And in that case, even though you are vile flooded, you could find a way to make use of the extra mana, especially when we include the adapt trigger that you could activate on the Emperor Bones, right? So there are still some ways for Chen to get back into the game from this point.
Yeah, I think the Netherglyph shrunk a little bit there because the Emperor of Bones trigger got rid of the spell bomb. So I think the Netherglyph might be down to a 3. And that's actually kind of huge if it is, because there's a big difference between 3 and 4, like you mentioned with Chen at 10,
Mhm.
where Chen can absorb 3 hits from that Glyph just fine as a 3 power, but as a 4/5, you can only take 2, so it does take a whole turn off the clock. And, I mean, if you're in Christian's seat, you're definitely looking for ideally one more threat. If Chen were to draw something like a Swords to Plowshares, Shares, or maybe a Solitude, then, you want to have a backup threat, which I think we did find. I think we're looking at a Murktide region. And, maybe, although I
The
guess
one
it's
that the
awkward because you have the basic swamp.
Yeah, I just spot a Bowmasters in that grip as well over there. Big ponder decision here for Valenti, who feels like, hey, I'm in control of this game, but knows how quickly things can turn once you start talking about Yorion blinks and all of the assorted value creatures that you can find in this Death and Taxes deck. I mean, imagine just even a Stone Forge, you'd get several active. There's a lot of ways to spend that mana. Another Goyf crashes in, Chin down to, we believe, 7 life here.
And
Another
another
Nethergoyf.
copy of Netherglyph. And looks like the hand, I believe, was it Bowmaster Forcible, I think? That might be what it is.
It's certainly Force of Will. I believe Bowmasters is likely the other one. So that would mean that the Force is not live here. Didn't catch what Chen drew.
We're motioning towards those vials. So, I mean, again, I think Chen's best draw is probably still Recruiter of the Guard. And then it opens up the question of if you draw Recruiter, what does that go and find? So, I mean, plethora of options. The Recruiter could find Solitude, and you could pitch the Yorion to do that. I guess I was gonna say you could get Flicker Wisp, but there's one vial on 4 and one on 3, so wouldn't necessarily be able to do that. You could go Bowmaster and then use the vial on 2. The Bowmaster chump block another Netherglaive, take the hit from the other one. So interesting decisions here for Chen, depending on what exactly was drawn. I mean, you have to assume it was a creature, given how he kind of motioned to those vials.
That's what I would say. Yeah. Otherwise, he's just faking us all out here. But here we go. In fact, it appears to be a 3-drop, or we're faking it out. We're activating Vile.
There it
And it
is.
is a Recruiter of the Guard. You called it one of the best possible. What do you do now if you're Chin? What are you going to be looking for off this Recruiter of the Guard? I suppose Valenti's thinking about a response here, but I imagine that no matter how you slice it, the search is going to happen. And there it goes. He picks up the deck. All right, Doom. What do you think he's looking for here?
It's really awkward because I think your best options are threes, right? Either Flicker Wisp or Skyclave Apparition. But you'll notice the decision from Chen to tick the second vial up to four due to
Yeah.
that, which I think was correct because at the time he was playing towards Yorion.
Right.
And you see him thumbing through that Skyclave. Like you would want to get a three here, a Skyclave, a second Recruiter, a Flicker Wisp. At two, there's not really a ton of options. Get Emperor of Bones, Stoneforge Mystic, Orcish Bowmasters, Spirit of the Labyrinth, and then there is one four in the form of Witch Enchanter. I know that some of these decks in some Death and Taxes deck in the past have played Palace Jailer, which I think
Right.
would be fantastic to grab here, but that is
Yeah.
not a card that Chen is currently playing.
Yeah. I think you hit on the high points here. There's also a line where maybe you get like Stoneforge. Yeah, you can play Stoneforge. Um, you could get Formalware, block with the Recruiter, plan on using Formalware next turn to get back Recruiter and search again. Um,
Hmm.
there's definitely, I guess the point is we called out all the equipment beforehand as playing a key role in this matchup. And now we're going to find out because Stoneforge has hit the hand. And actually, it looks like we moved to blocks here, right? So he's going to opt to take a hit from one of the Nethergloives. It'd be 3 damage in theory, down to 4. And looking at an instep Stoneforge. So a lot of options are going to be available to Chin here.
Yeah, I think Stoneforge does make the most sense. You called out the formal wear. Even the Phantom Blade is not too bad, where you can
Right.
go Violin the Stoneforge, get the blade, untap. Well, I guess that doesn't quite do it because then the Stoneforge gets the blade, and then even if you can put in the blade, then you can kill one of the Netherglyphs. But then the Stoneforge has to be. I guess what you can do is
You
you could
block,
block with
blink,
Stoneforge
block, blink.
before damage, activate. Yeah, that could be a line.
But
The
you can
other
do, he'll be able to Yorion as well.
Oh, because the vial's gonna go to 5. Okay, so you could even go get the blade, untap vial up to 5, Stoneforge in the blade. Okay, we're gonna go for the formal wear instead, which is still pretty good because now, oh my god, you can actually go formal wear back the recruiter, vial up to 5, recruiter search, Violin Yorion, Yorion Flicker the recruiter and the formal wear get back Emperor Bones, recruiter gets something else. Like this is oh boy.
And then the beauty of all of this is that it has completely played around this force of will
Yep.
sitting in Valenti's hand. 100%. Even the formal wear, which is not a creature that can be vowed in, can be stone forged in to play around the force of will that Valenti has been holding on to the entire game, waiting for his target. And the only target I think that's even been presented was that Swords to Plowshares,
Ooh.
which was in fact count or not
So
counted, I imagine. Yeah.
yeah, there is actually Christian has some good counterplay here. There's a brazen borrower, and I think what Christian is thinking
Ah.
about is bouncing the vial on 4. Because if you bounce the vial on 4, you know for a fact that Lion is not going to be able to put that Yorion into play, given there's only 3 lands in play. So I think Christian is weighing the decision between bouncing the vial on 4 or
Mhm.
perhaps bouncing the Stone Forge so you won't be able to activate it and put the formal wear into play. I think
Eh,
both of those are good options.
That turns on if there's another blue card in hand. I can, actually might have been looking at the Bowmaster. It's hard to say because racing is very much an option here, right? Bowmasters can go face. So
Mhm.
uh there's a lot available here too that to think about. And this is the window before Stoneforge untaps. If you decide you want to deal with the Stoneforge, and the answer is going to be Brazen Borrower. You called it the Ether Vial on 4 counters, and that means Yorion is going to be turned off for what Valenti hopes is the duration of the game. So, all right, big turn here though for Chen, who is going to untap with a Stoneforge Mystic and a Vial on 3 and 2 or 4, depending on which one he chooses here. And his entire hand is known, so we'll just play with it face up.
Yeah, see, this is weird. Like, so this is a tricky decision because you kind of want to tick the second vial up to 4, but as we mentioned last turn, recruiter chains, you'd much rather have 2 vials on 3. So it's a
Yeah.
huge decision here for Lion, and Lion does have to make the decision before the draw step. So it looks like we're thinking But yeah, the other consideration here for Christian was casting the borrower means that he doesn't have force of will up. Now,
Right.
granted, force of will not very good here because the Stoneforge, activation can't be countered, and then same thing with vials. So, Christian probably totally okay with going off of force of will. Now, let me actually,
Upkeep,
I want to
upkeep. Yeah, this was an upkeep recruiter with the formal wear off Stoneforge.
Yeah, I want to read this. So, formal wear. Oh, okay. So it says when it enters, return a creature with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield and attach it to it. I was wondering if there was a window where you could
Hmm.
bowmaster the recruiter before it got equipped, but there is no
Right.
window. It just
Yeah.
automatically attaches it to it. So,
No, that's a good call out, and looks like we are.
uh, well, we have a situation here. Lion has gone through looking through the deck list, and you'll notice there is a Psychic Frog in Lion's deck. That is not a card that Lion registered. So, presumably, there was a situation maybe in the last match where an Emperor of Bones took a Psychic
Yes,
Frog, and yeah, maybe the Psychic Frog got accidentally swept up, maybe playing same sleeves or something like
I think
that.
that's
So,
someone else's deck.
yep.
Um, okay, well, I imagine the judges will take a few minutes to resolve this, and if we're able to get back to the match, we certainly will. I'm not sure how this will actually be resolved. Are we able? I'm not sure if we're able to hop over to another game or not. As you can see, further down the table, in standard, Rakdos Agro taking on Golgari, Blake, and Lucas. Uh, we see those games, the other two tables both go up a game. So we will get to the match back as soon as we can. But in the meantime, welcome back here to the booth. I'm Corbin Hostler, joined by Devin Doomwake O'Donnell. It is round 6 of 7 Swiss rounds here in Madison for the Team Trios event. Devin, you and Will were able to get through 5 excellent rounds of team play this morning. And now we're here in the home stretch, heading towards that top 8, watching some of a little bit of what every Magic format has to offer.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I think we might be ready to go right back down to our modern match. I know we've been doing our best to keep Nadu off camera, but this is the only match that is currently live. So we have Nadu in the hands of Ryan Bellamy on the left-hand side of your screen, and Demir Agro from Jacob Zhang on the right. And it looks like Jacob's up a game, so not too bad.
Demir aggro, an interesting one. Not doing
Take a
much
look at the
aggro
deck
at the
list.
moment, but then
Yeah, this
again, neither is Bellamy with just a wall of roots. So Fatal Push is going to take care of that.
looks like this deck list from Jacob looks very, very similar to what we saw from Christian Valenti yesterday.
Hmm.
Murktide, Orcish Bowmasters, Psychic Frog, couple of main deck Harbingers, and then a whole bunch of removal. Counter spells, fatal pushes, force negations, a lot of interaction, free and or cheap. And just trying to sort of sit on that Psychic Frog. But as you mentioned, there's not really a lot of pressure here for Jacob. And presumably the games where Demir is winning in this matchup is most likely kind of what we saw Christian do yesterday, where it's play a cheap threat, back it up with some counter magic or some interaction.
Hmm.
But if you give this Nadu deck too much time, it does have a lot of redundancy. And, we even have Urza Saga. Okay, we're getting word that it appears Legacy is back. So not exactly sure what the fix was. We will maybe get confirmation from production, but I think we are ready to go back down to Legacy.
As much as we know you all wanted to watch a little bit more Nadu, I guess we can get back to this really interesting legacy match we were on. So, all right, coming back here, taking stock of things. It looks like Yorion is still revealed in hand. The recruiter has the formal wear on it. It's going to block in Nethergoy. If a token is coming in, it looks like it was a Skyclave Apparition token that was then uh, removed. So resulting in the token existing. So there we go. The formal wear is going to fall off. The Stoneforge Mystic, though, still alive and well, and we do have a vial at 4, taking up to 5 for Yorion
Man,
here. So, yeah, this looks like maybe a corner turn for Chen, huh?
the formal wear is such a cool card. It's before I'll be
Yes.
honest with you. Before today, I've never seen it before, but it's so sick because the Stoneforge can find it. As you pointed out earlier, there's the situation where if they kill the Stoneforge, then you can just formal wear back the Stoneforge. And once you get to situations like this, you can start Yorioning to blink the formal wear that gets you back more stuff. Like for example, Lion could go Violin Yorion, Flicker the
Hmm.
Stoneforge, and the Formal Wear. The Formal Wear gets back the Recruiter. Recruiter gets another Recruiter. You can vial that in and then go get something else. Like it's just this deck. I feel like can go from 0 to 100 so fast.
And what's interesting is we called out having the 3 ether vials in hand as being bad, and to be fair, it is kind of bad, right? But we saw
Yeah.
one of them have to eat the Brazen Borrower. That was a resource that Valenti had to spend, and the loops that they've enabled now that we found the recruiter to play with is actually kind of nutty. And here we go, Yorion coming in off the vial, target Stoneforge and Formalware. This is just a huge corner turn. That's like um, big difference turning point in this game. I think if we look back at and that card getting removed,
Oh
that
yeah.
was what allowed Chen to really string all of this together. Was Valenti not being able to save that or not choosing to save that there?
So I'm assuming the token that's in play for Christian is, I would guess, an Orc Army token. Um, so it looks like we're going to go back and we're going to get the Skyclave off of the Formal Wear. That's going to kill the Netherglyph, and then the Stoneforge is probably going to go fetch the Blade. What was it called again? I get the name of it. A 3, 2, 1 Phantom Blade.
Yeah, that's what
Most
he's
likely,
pulled
I
to the
guess you
front.
can also maybe get the Cauldra too, but I think it's a little bit safer to get the Blade. And what's nice about getting the Blade here is you do have 4 mana. So if the Stoneforge dies and you draw land, you can still cast the Blade. I guess you could also go towards Lion Sash too to eat the graveyard, maybe make Netherglyph smaller. Yeah, there we
It
see.
is the blade. If we can get the Phantom Blade up on screen, maybe you called it.
Yeah, this card is so cool where it just similar thing with the Stoneforge package, just turning your Stoneforge into a relatively cheap removal spell because you can vial it in for or Stoneforge it in for 2 mana. So these new cards, Phantom Blade and the Formal Wear, just really adding so much depth to this Stoneforge package. Which not it's not just a 4/4 lifelink anymore. It's a lot more than that.
I, I'm not sure Assassin's Creed is on Magic Online.
I think it is.
Is it? That would be good.
Yeah,
I
I
didn't
know. I
realize
know.
there
I
were.
played. I played a little bit with Basim, so.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure if there were going to be any actually legacy or modern relevant cards from the format or from the set, but man, that one sure is good, isn't it? And this Stoneforge decks, it gives this stone. It's almost like a main deck Karn board, right, where it's just silver bulleting all of these different effects stapled onto equipment now, including removal spells.
We could be possibly be talking about Death and Taxes in Modern. We have Stoneforge, we got the Blade. I'm just throwing that out there.
It's a reasonable point.
We don't have the Formal Wear, but we got the Blade.
We do have the vials. You have the sky. I mean, honestly, looking up and down this list, everything but recruiter, right?
Most of it, yeah, most of it. See a brainstorm here from Christian. So Christian's in this weird spot where, had a bunch of pressure, no longer has a bunch of pressure. And now, to be fair, there is a Brazen Borrower. So with Lion at 3 life, there is an opportunity for maybe Christian to find some way to get to get the Orion out of here. But I mean, if you look at the removal spells in Christian's deck list, let me pull this up. There are 4 Fatal Push, and there is a single copy, just one, of Go for the Throat. So if Christian can find that Go for the Throat, depending how long it takes him to do so, may
Yeah.
be good enough.
Well,
Although I guess if
recruiter the guard was actually printed into modern. I forgot
it
about that.
was,
So you
yeah, it
could you
was.
could
Oh
you
yeah.
could build quite a bit of this deck at home.
Yeah, and I mean at this point, if I guess yeah, if you don't find the Go for the Throat this turn, it's not going to be good enough next turn because the Blade is going to put, or the Stoneforge is going to put the Blade into play, which can kill the Borrower. So
Right.
yeah, this one might be slipping away from Christian here.
Yeah, this was a tough spot ever since the all it took was finding one target with all those to start this. Remember, all of this began 3 or 4 or 5 turns ago off of finding one recruiter of the guard, which then went and got Stoneforge, which then went and got everything, which began all of this comeback. All of this is off of one recruiter trigger. An
Yeah, crazy.
incredible, yeah, like just like an incredible showcase of why people play Death and Taxes. Like Legacy is where you play the most powerful cards ever printed in Magic, and it's also where you play 2/2s for 3.
Aether Vial, and yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, there's just so much synergy in this deck, where the Aether Vial chains, finding recruiter, recruiter for recruiter for recruiter, that gets you to Yorion. Yorion can blink all of that stuff, and it's just an endless value train. And it's really hard for these fair decks. I mean, Death and Taxes historically maybe not the best against combo, where it's trying to play a much longer game with stuff like taking advantage of Yorion and all these ETB, like, basically just card advantage cards.
yeah.
And some decks don't care about that, but Christians is certainly one that does.
Okay, Christian now all of a sudden feeling quite a bit of pressure here. He's got access to a couple cards. In fact, two cards drawn so far for Cameo. What does he need to do here to try to dig out of this spot?
So remember last turn, Christian had a window to find Go for the Throat on Yorion for the borrower, but
Right?
because we know about the blade, presumably that's not going to be enough, because even if Go for the Throat is drawn, Chen can put in the blade, kill the borrower. The Yorion can also block the Tameo. I mean, I guess maybe from Christian side of things, you have to hope that Chen fires off the blade and maybe find something like a Murktide Regent, and that
Yeah.
may be good enough, but we shall see.
It looked like that was Christian going to try to get for inactivation of Tameo, right?
Mhm.
To transform. And yep, it's going to get, as you called, targeted by the blade from the Stoneforge. And like that, you're down mana, you're down a card, and the blade just comes into play and makes something even bigger. And that's something's the Skyclave Apparition blocking the Nethergoyf.
Yep. So now, interesting enough, that sequence, I think, if you're in Christian side of
For
things,
five.
I think that sequence actually was not too bad, because remember, there is still that one Go for the Throat in Christian's deck list, and you got to keep the
Right.
borrower in play. So
Right.
all things considered, I think Christian is kind of okay with that outcome. He knew about the blade, so basically forcing Chen to use the blade on the Tameo by trying to flip it, I think makes a lot of sense from Christian's side of things. But I think from here, it kind of has to be some combination of Go for the Throat and or Murktide Regent,
Mhm.
something along those lines. And I think Christian looking at a Nethergrave gonna go ahead and shuffle that away.
Yeah, he came to the same conclusion you did that those three cards on top were not going to get it done with the Ponder and opts to shuffle and take a random one on top instead and passes the turn back. You know what else is we talk about building this deck in modern. There was Wastelands have done work for Chen this game. While Chen has been getting ahead on mana with the Ether Vials, the Wasteland has really restricted what Christian has been able to do. So I do believe Valenti is going to be having the Force of Will. If there's still that Force in hand, we'll now have blue fodder for it. Uh, and it is back over to the Skyclave. Sorry, that Nethergoyf was underneath it earlier. So it's only just this small board here for Valenti, who does have the 13 life to try to work with, but is facing down a board that is basically going to give him maybe one more turn.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I think Valenti was working with, I want to say, a Force of Will and a Bowmasters. Couldn't quite see what was drawn after the Ponder. I think it's looks like Forceful Blue card. Okay, Stoneforge Mystic. Now you might think we've gone through two targets, maybe out of targets. Oh no, there's plenty more. There is a copy of Lion Sash and a copy of Cauldra. And what is interesting about this? Okay, heads up play here from Chen. I missed this. Chen went activate with Stoneforge, hold priority, and put in the new Stoneforge. The reason that line is good is because if Christian has some
Yeah.
way to kill the Stoneforge in response, you're kind of basically, if Chen says, okay, I cast Stoneforge, Christian can respond, kill the other one. By doing it this way, even if Christian kills the non-summoning 6 Stoneforge, Chen is still going to get to put that Cauldron into play. So very, very heads up line here for Chen, where Caldra's going to come in with a 5, Germ's going to be a 5/5. It's going to be hard for Christian to block. And at 13 life, Christian, really needs to find something like that Go for the Throat. And it is a one of, so that's,
Well,
it's got to come soon.
yeah, it's low odds, but this is a brainstorm ponder deck. We've seen Christian dig through a lot of his deck already. So, and I think that's probably it, right? Because this Cauldron complete, it looks like we will have lethal presented very soon. In fact, you see Christian fall down to 3 life himself there. Well, I'm not going to say Chin wouldn't have minded a point this game just to gain some life, but here goes blind brainstorm, I think, from Valenti. Does he find go for the throat?
Yeah, there's that one of. Couldn't tell. That's a daze. That's a ponder.
Under.
I
That doesn't get
think
it done without a land.
I want to say there is a black card in there, but I can't quite tell what it was. I think putting back a Netherglyph. I see ponder, daze, force of will. What is that black card? Is that a
Oh, it
Bowmasters?
does have a land. Okay. I think it's probably a Bowmasters, but this is live. He's got a land, so we've got to ponder for another look, although it's really just a look at one, given that the brainstorm put two back on top, and that means it's a shuffle. And we're gonna have another blind flip. All kinds of blind flips this weekend. Not
You see Christian with the
under.
slow roll. He knows.
Yeah.
Is it a go for the throat?
It is not.
Not.
And that means Lion Chin takes down the first game here in our legacy match. And you know what? This is going to be where we're sticking because his teammate Jacob Zing took down Ryan Bellamy. That was Nadu losing, by the way, in modern. Meanwhile, his other teammate, Blake Deswart, on Rakdos Aggro, lost to Lucas Parsons. And that means that this is what this entire round is going to come down to for these teams, Lion Chen versus Christian Valenti in the best of three.
Yeah, I mean, that was a really interesting game number one that we get to watch there. There was
Yeah.
a little bit of early pressure from Christian. Like you mentioned, there was that turn where Christian did have the psychic frog, and Christian looked like he was kind of ready to start turning the corner. But that turn sequence where Lion went fatal push, or excuse me, swords to plowshares to get rid of the psychic frog, just buy a lot of time and then eventually get to that point where Recruiter of the Guard opens up a chain, you get to Yorion, and you just
Mhm.
really saw the Death and Taxes deck just kind of, operate at full functionality.
Well, yeah, and I want to note that we called out a force of will in Valenti's hand very early, and it was never played. Maybe eventually got put back on top with Brainstorm or something. I'm not sure, but it was just never played. Those ether vials allowed the Death and Taxes deck to just play around so much and just really mess up the entire kind of purpose and goal of the blue deck, which is to deploy threats and then play free counter spells like Daze and Force of Will to keep your important stuff off the board. It didn't work. Death and Taxes take it down. You can see why a historically mono white deck, in this case it is black and white, but why Death and Taxes works in Legacy. Maybe we can take a look at the sideboards here too to see how they're going to approach it. We have the Demir Frog deck that Valenti has played so well on the one side against the Death and Taxes deck. And it's going to be a lot of creature combat, I think, in these sideboard games, right, Doom?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I mean, Death and Taxes historically, as I mentioned earlier, deck that is very, very good at beating up on these sort of more fair decks. If you are not positioning yourself to, win the game early in very unconventional means, the Death and Taxes deck is so good at just playing to the battlefield. As you mentioned, especially against the cards like Force of Will, it just sort of
Mm-hmm.
gets to blank those. I mean, as far as the sideboards are concerned, if you want to just take a quick look at those, I can run it off here. So Chen is looking at 4 White Orchid Phantom, 3 Path to Exile, 2 Surgical Extraction, 2 Wrath of the Skies, a Containment Priest, a Fairy Macabre, a Grafdigger's Cage, and the Yorion.
Mm-hmm.
So, because Chen is sort of in a weird way pre-boarded for matchups like this,
Yeah.
probably not going to go towards a ton of sideboard cards. I could see something like Path to Exile because that is a way to more ways to answer stuff like Murktide Region and Netherglyph, which can be, a little bit of a problem. But past that, I don't think Chen really has to do that much.
Yeah, we did see a little bit there where it felt like those two Nethergoyfs were all that were going to come out of that deck for a long time, right? So if you are able to just peel a couple of removal spells, answer a couple threats, they may spend a lot of time spinning their wheels with brainstorming and pondering and drawing dazes and forces and all these things that are fine, but don't necessarily put pressure on you and give you a lot of time to set up an engine, which is what we saw the Demir deck there not be able to compete with, which was frankly the engine that was Recruiter of the Guard and then Stoneforge Mystic. And that is going to be the big difference maker, I think, in the match is if Chin is able to get something like that rolling. Meanwhile, Valenti's really only engine card in that sense is Frog, and that's why it's named Demir Frog. And once
Yep.
the Frog went off the battlefield, things got a lot worse for Valenti. So we'll see how this one plays out. It was a Mother of Runes, Eden and Fatal Push to get things rolling.
Yeah, and you want to notice already, like we've only played one turn, but this game is so much worse for Lion because of the missing. He's missing an Aether Vial. Last
Yeah.
game, as you mentioned that a couple times. Those counter spells from Valenti were just completely dead, just stuck in hand the whole game. Counter spells gonna be a little bit better this game without the presence of Aether Vial. So Chen's hand, well, good. It looks like a plow, a solitude, I think a witch enchanter, a recruiter of
Mhm.
the guard, and I can't quite tell what that full art card is, but some spells. Just but yeah, again, it's you're gonna have to play into those dazes and those force of wills. And with Christian already having a threat in play, it's kind of this is exactly where Christian wants to be.
Yeah, I think Line might have ripped a Thoughtseize here. I see Prismatic Vista in hand. That's a Caracas in play, right? So that's a
Mhm.
nice bit of utility later on, but it does not cast a Thoughtseize. And Nethergoy for Valenti, well, that's pretty quick. He had to set it up with a brainstorm, but this was a pretty efficient use of 3 mana if you're sitting on the Demir side. And there we go. That you're just going to see land to play around days, and then swords to plowshares, the Nethergoy before deciding on the next course of action here. Because remember, there's also that Witch Enchanter that can be played as a land. So lots to think about, but it is going to be now Prismatic Vista and Thoughtseize. So the decision Chin was facing there, right, was do I want to play around days on my swords or play around days on my Thoughtseize?
Yeah, and I like this a lot from Chen. Chen recognizes that his hand is really good, right? A lot of powerful cards, the Solitude, the Recruiter. Given enough time, I think on average, his hand, like the spells that he has, I think are enough to sort of outpower and outmaneuver this blue black deck. So really wants to prioritize getting those cheap threats off the battlefield. Thoughts he's trading one for one, you're okay with that. That's fine.
Hmm.
But it when Thoughtseize is trading one for one, like when Thoughtseize is trading one for one when you're versus your opponent having a threat, that's when it gets a lot worse. So
Yeah.
as we see a wasteland here from Christian, that's going to cut Lion's ability to at least attempt to play a 3 drop.
We're legacy gaming right now. Thoughtseize getting Dade, Wasteland taking out Caracas, everybody having one permanent in play on turn 4. Love it. All right. Well, we do see that Witch Enchanter come down as a tapped land because that is how Chin's gonna have to get white mana. That certainly slowed him down. It was a nice Wasteland play from Valenti, who looks like to have at least a couple more lands here because there goes a fetch, and I spotted another underground in hand. So actually, he was able to slow Chin down here. No Vial. There's no early creatures, and it just looks like that Solitude. And we'll try to resolve a Recruiter next turn. But Frog and play for Valenti now. Any counterspell on for Chin would allow the Frog to perhaps get going.
Yeah, and this is kind of putting Chen to the test. Do we have another removal spell to be able to answer this frog? I don't know if anybody in chat knows what the full heart card in Chen's hand is, but I'm not exactly sure. I saw Solitude, the Recruiter, and there's one other card that I'm not sure. But this is putting Chen to the test. Do we have the answer for the frog? I don't think I saw Swords to Plowshares, but we're going to be going towards the recruiter. Now, if this resolves, Chen can go find a Skyclave apparition.
Oh.
And I don't think Christian has a forcible or a daze.
There you go, and it instantly resolves, and puts a body in play as well for Chin. So this was a key turn. This was a chance where Valenti would have really turned the corner hard, right? Just imagine a daze there. You're able to counter it. You're able to get going with your frog. I think that game probably snowballs pretty quickly. Instead, we have a pretty interesting setup now where we have a delayed answer, and that's Skyclave Apparition to the frog. But Valenti got a lot of choices here to have to deal with, and that's a pretty easy one, I guess, is Bowmaster's away your blocker.
Yep, Skyclave is going to be the option. I think Lion was maybe interested in chump blocking with the recruiter, but the Bowmasters is going to prevent that from happening. The other question is maybe you could try to Solitude the Psychic Frog here, but you don't really
Yeah.
want to go down a card. And I think the game is going to last long enough where you can maybe just get to a spot where you hardcast the Solitude. And I think that maybe is what Chen is thinking about.
Yeah, and I think it's double Solitude in hand. Chat's chiming in here. That's what I think as well. I could be wrong, but you do see him with that pulled out to the front along with a land. So we see 4 lands available for Chen. So it's going to take you a while, but there is a reasonable line where you just play Solitude after Solitude, starting on turn, well, not turn 5, but by the time you hit your 5th land again.
Yeah, I'm being told by chat. Chat's never wrong that it appears it is a Flicker Wisp.
Oh,
So
okay.
Flicker Wisp is the other alt art card, and that one is pretty good when in combination with stuff like the Recruiter's dead now, but in with Skyclave apparition, right? You can Skyclave the Psychic Frog, Flicker Wisp the Skyclave that can come down, kill the Bowmasters. So it is certainly something. I'm not sure exactly what the players are discussing here. Maybe something with a bauble draw,
Maybe a
or
bubble draw. Yeah.
not sure.
I didn't catch it where we're at on it either. I saw Valenti activated and follow up on the draw here, but we'll let them get this figured out. Reminder, this is going to decide who wins this. This is round 6 of our team trios. The team on your left, the Valenti Bellamy Parson team, is 4-0-1. So a win here, if Valenti's able to climb this hill, being down a game to Chen, would put them in an excellent position heading into the last round. Meanwhile, Chen, Zhang, and the Swarter hanging in there, 4-1, trying to get to 5-1 with a victory here. Chen trying to pick up this last game, but certainly is going to be under the gun. This has been we're heading towards the end of our weekend here. We had sealed and modern events yesterday that were huge. We had a lot of fun covering those, and we are in the home stretch now, Devin. We got some legacy gaming. It looks like we are back on the clock here with a Skyclave apparition.
Yeah, presumably that one is going to take care of the Psychic Frog. And see, it's so funny because this game was interesting where this is the game where Lion didn't have the vials, but this is the game
Mhm.
where Christian didn't draw the counter spells. You saw
Yeah.
last game where Christian's counter spells were awful against the vials, but when neither player draws either of them, it's sort of the same. Oh,
Oh,
a
Stifle.
stifle on the Skyclave. Haven't seen that card in a while.
There were two stifles in Valenti's main deck. It does feel like we talked earlier about how Nimble Mongoose used to be played in these style of decks. I remember they were called Canadian Thresh, and I remember being introduced to the card Stifle
Oh
for the
yeah.
first time. And wow, did it fall out of favor for quite a while, but here it is back. It has been finding play again, and it stifled the heck out of that. And now all of a sudden, your 2/2 for 3 mana is actually just a 2/2 for 3 mana.
Corbin, you might know the answer to this. Why is it called Canadian Threshold? I know why it's called Threshold, obviously, but was it designed
I
by?
believe I don't know. I
Okay,
assume that it was a Canadian team or group of players.
makes sense.
Um, that would make sense, but it's a Magic deck name. So
That
somebody
is true.
might have been like somebody might have seen somebody walk by with like a Canadian shirt on. There's really no telling,
Tricks,
how
Fruity
Magic deck names,
Pebbles,
yeah,
Cocoa Puffs. I mean, who knows?
Ponza,
Machine Head.
Cherry.
Yeah, there's some throwbacks for sure. All right, Christian's going to go all in. Well, all in. I say all in. There's still one card in hand, but Christian is going to shove a little bit on the Psychic Frog and is really going to get punished by this Solitude. Now, that being said, Lion only has one card left over, and that's going to work. So, no counter spell, no additional. Like you said, there was two stifles, so
Mhm.
Christian didn't have the second one. But I believe the last card in hand is a Fatal Push. So Christian doesn't have a lot of good leftovers, and Lion has some pretty good top decks here, and still hasn't even gone towards the Orion yet.
Yeah, here we go. After all the resources that have been traded throughout all of this, it is one card in hand for each player. One player with a 1/1 in play and one with a 2/2. I guess two 1/1s. Um, so here we go. That last card from Valenti, though, was a removal spell. It takes down Chin's last creature. I'm not sure what Chin's got in hand. Uh, is going for a fourth mana here, though, so is going to be able to play pretty much anything he draws, and as you mentioned, has access still to Yorion out of the Yorion board.
Surveil Land. It's going to give Chen an extra look here. I'm trying to think of what the best draw here is for Chen. I mean, Recruiter of the Guard, fantastic card that can go find anything. Even something like Stoneforge Mystic is pretty good
Mhm.
here. Honestly, the Emperor of Bones would be kind of insane because there's so many creatures in the graveyard, specifically the Solitude already there. So a lot of good top decks here for Lion. Take a slow peel. Love to see it. Looks like
And
it
was
was a
able to
Marsh
use that
Flats.
Surveil land to put a Marsh Flats into the graveyard.
I think he drew another one though. The classic Surveil bug.
Yeah.
Got IRL Surveil bugged. So I think we're gonna go for the Orion, yeah. And
So
the
there's a
hand
vial.
is a vial. Okay.
That's
Might as
probably
well
the
cast
worst
that.
draw.
Yeah. Vile really good on turn 1, not good on turn 10.
Well, if Christian whiffed and Christian has lots of, not great draws here, Chen's still in a, I guess, okay position. You fetch out here. I'm not sure if we have another surveil land or not. I think we decided no, right? But either way, you're able to pull out a land. You can play Yorion as a backup, but you should have fairly good draws left in your deck.
Yeah, tons of them. I mean, Emperor of Bones, Recruiter, Solitude, Stoneforge Mystic, Flicker Wisp, even to kill the
Yeah.
Orc Army token, his
Anything
own
but
Orcish Bowmasters, Skyclave, basically any spell that's not Aether Vial or
right.
Thoughtseize.
Well, and Valenti's got one unknown, so there's a
All
possibility
right.
Thoughtseize could trade one for one. Instead, it's just an Arid Mesa, play around days. And a Yorion, best blocker. Oh,
Oh, not a removal spell like a Go for the Throat that we talked about last game, but a
yeah.
semi, a temporary answer, but that's going to allow some damage in here for Christian. Attack for
Yeah, and it ties up
2.
Chin's mana.
Yep. It's almost like a time
Oh,
walk.
yeah, big whiff on the draw step for Valenti.
I think Chen debating on whether or not we want to crack this Arid Mesa. Thinking about it. Now, the thing for Chen is there's only one surveillance, so doesn't really want to. Yeah, there's only one surveillance, and not a ton of reason to crack this Arid Mesa now.
Yeah, just the good old fashioned deck thinning, which is
Yep,
probably not worth the one life when you're in this race situation.
exactly.
It's the surveillance completely changed that though, which is interesting, right?
It's crazy. I actually, I got to tell you, when the surveillance were first spoiled, I did not think that they would have this much of an impact. I
I
figured that,
agree.
maybe some modern decks would want to play one copy, and I've kind of convinced myself with a lot of modern decks that, I give me the third one, maybe even give me the fourth one. It's there's some decks that want to play that many, and they're actually they really do change the like
Yeah.
it seems minor and very minute as we draw an Emperor Bones. That's probably one of the best draw steps here for Lion. It seems very minor, but it's nice that it just increases the percentage by even just that little bit.
And it feels very good, right? Like we have seen a few chances here where players have had, chances kind of go to waste because their land came into play tapped. It does happen, but it feels so good when you get a fetch and just put a land into your graveyard in a late game situation like this.
Yeah, this is the first time we've really seen Emperor of Bones in action, and oh boy, this
Yeah,
card is crazy. You
look
get
at
to go
that.
combat, exile the Solitude, and then you can go put counters on the Emperor to get the Solitude. That's going to get rid of the Brazen Borrower, and yeah, this card is kind of sick in this deck.
Death and Tax is really putting on a show, showing how tricky it can be. Even staring down some of the, some of the most powerful cards in the format.
Oh, get it in there, Yorion.
Yeah,
Last turn we were on defense. Get it in there. We're gonna gain 3 life from the Solitude anyway, so it's fine.
the big attack.
Yeah, I think the other thing that Chen was thinking about was Emperor on Recruiter. You can go Recruiter for Flicker Wisp, Vial in the Flicker Wisp, Blink the Recruiter, and just go on from there. Just basically just inevitable like endless train of value here. And there's the
You
Path
just bought
Exile
that
that
path.
was
You
brought
nailed it.
in.
Yeah.
Yep, not great
Well,
on
and
this
that's huge
board.
in this spot because, well, it means it's not doing anything right now, but Chin's ahead on board and now has a preemptive answer to anything Valenti might do, and that's a daze I spotted in Valenti's hand that isn't going to do anything at all in this circumstance.
Yeah, I think there was like before the Path to Exile, there was a chance that maybe if Valenti drew something like a Murktide Regent, that maybe could have gotten him out of this. Where you have attack with that, maybe a chump block from the Yorion has to come in with Chen at 14. But yeah, it seems nearly impossible for Christian to get out of this spot now.
Okay, I think we are nearing the end of the round in the room for people curious. So this is definitely one of the last matches, and it's been a great one. I'm glad we took Legacy here. It's been a fun one to start the day off. I love watching people play this format, especially when with decks like this. This is really interactive. This is not your, turn to comboing each other kind of game plans.
We have some
That
people in chat asking if there are any other ways to put counters onto the Emperor of Bones, and from the deck list that I'm seeing, I don't think so. I think it is just the Emperor. So, and there is the Murktide region,
and
as we mentioned. That Path
it,
to Exile was such a huge top deck.
yeah, and we'll have to see what that other card is for Valenti. But if it's something that can protect the Murktide, the game gets much more interesting. Along with that days. Now we know there is a Path to the Exile in hand for Chin, and I suspect we will see that come out here pretty soon. But does Valenti have the answer? Because if he doesn't, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. But if he does, that Murktide could take over the game.
I think Valenti's hand might be double days. I know there's at least one
Ooh.
days, but I
Double
think I might
days
have
is
saw a
real
second
feel
one.
bad here.
Yeah, not great. Well, we're gonna see. Path to Exile is going to be cast on the Murktide,
Oh
and
no.
yeah, it is double days.
That's a good game right there. Lion Chen taking it down with Death and Taxes and Legacy 2 over Christian Valenti, giving the team of Chin Zing the win to move to 5-1 here in Madison. I'm Corbin Hostler, joined in the booth by Devin Doom, Mike O'Donnell. Welcome in. Thank you for hanging out with us while we watched that match. That was an excellent start to my day. You've been at this all day, Devin. That was how's that can stack up to what we've seen so far?
That was pretty good. Like you said, I'm really glad we get to see that Death and Taxes deck in action because we have really not seen it at all today, and that is the first time that I've really ever seen Emperor of Bones in Legacy or on camera. Period. And
Yeah.
we got to show it off, and that was a really really sweet match. Just kind of the game, the way those games played out between the first game where Valenti drew all the counter spells and Chen had all the vials, and then the second game where Valenti drew no counter spells, but
Yeah.
Chen didn't have the vials. The way that kind of those kind of cat and mouse games play out was really fun to watch.
Yeah, that's a really kind of legacy in a nutshell. So you see the highs and lows of playing days in your deck there. It's extremely powerful when you have sort of priority with something like Psychic Frog, and not very good when you're behind like that and you have 2 days in hand. Your opponent has 7 mana. So that was legacy, everybody, and that was round 6 of our tournament here. That means there is one more round before we cut to top 8 here on Team Trios. And that is what we have for you when we come back on the other side of the break. So stick with us here in Madison in our G Championship Series. We will be back for round 7 to decide who will play in our top 8. Thanks for hanging out.